Welcome to Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines, your window into relationship, identity, safety, emotional awareness, regulation and intelligence, unleashed potential, passion and purpose.
Welcome back to Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines. This is our trauma-informed leadership series, and I am Krista Fee. Today we're talking about something that both inspires me and challenges me every time that I reflect on it. What happens when a leader becomes more than a leader? When they become a movement? Movements don't start with crowds. They don't begin with strategy or polished marketing campaigns. Movements start with one life lived with such clarity, conviction, and example that others begin to align themselves to it. Sometimes that spark comes from hope, sometimes from pain. But either way, it begins with one leader whose embodied presence ignites something bigger than themselves. Let's start with Nelson Mandela, a leader in chains. For 27 years, Mandela sat in prison. He had no microphone, no political office, no army. From the outside, he looked powerless. But in reality, he was literally becoming a movement. Because while he sat behind bars, his unwavering moral clarity spread across South Africa and beyond. His resilience became a symbol. His very existence told people that you can take my freedom, but you can't take my mission. By the time Mandela was released in 1990, the movement had become unstoppable. It wasn't one man anymore. It was millions who had drawn strength from his embodied example. Mandela didn't just lead a movement. He became the movement. So let's discuss the anatomy of a movement leader. What transforms a leader into a movement? I believe there's three core elements. The first is embodiment of values. Their life is the message. They don't just talk about justice, they live it. They don't just call for courage, they embody it. Second, a willingness to sacrifice. Movements rise when people see that the leader is willing to pay the price. The sacrifice validates the mission. And the third is contagion of hope. Through resilience and clarity, they signal possibility to others. Their hope literally becomes viral. And this magic combination creates a ripple effect. One nervous system, one life can ignite thousands. So let's look at the neuroscience of why people rally around leaders. Humans are wired for mirror neurons. We literally copy the emotions and behaviors of those around us. When a leader embodies courage, our mirror neurons light up and we feel courage. But when a leader embodies despair, we absorb that despair. This is why one leader's resilience can shift entire communities. Their nervous system becomes the regulating anchor for thousands. They embody hope, and that hope becomes contagious. Think about it. Most people don't join a movement because of a spreadsheet of strategies. They join because they feel something when they see someone else live it out. They feel safety, conviction, possibility, and their nervous systems align. Think about Malala Yousafzai, a teenager movement. A young girl in Pakistan who refused to be silent about girls' education. At just 15, she was shot in the head by extremists who wanted to silence her. But her survival and her voice ignited a global movement. Malala didn't just advocate for education. She embodied the movement. Her life said that even in the face of death, education matters. And that's the power of embodiment. Movements spread not because of slogans, but because of lives lived with conviction. Or think about Rosa Parks, A simple no. Sometimes movements start with something deceptively simple. Rosa Parks sat on a bus and refused to give up her seat. That one act of moral clarity became the spark for the Montgomery bus boycott, which became the cornerstone of the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks didn't hold a title and she wasn't wealthy, but she embodied quiet defiance, and it lit a match for change. Her example shows us that movements don't always need loud speeches. Sometimes they just need embodied clarity expressed in the single word no. But we have to look at the shadow side as well, or false movements. We need to pause here because not all movements are good. History is also filled with leaders who embodied hate, fear, or violence, and they became movements in their own right. From authoritarian dictators to cult leaders, their embodied presence also spread contagiously. This is why trauma-informed leadership demands the moral question: what kind of movement am I becoming? Because your embodied energy, whether healing or harmful, will be multiplied in the people who follow you. I want to stay vulnerable and transparent throughout this journey. So here's a brief personal reflection on my responsibility as a movement leader. This is where it gets a little personal. When I first realized people weren't just listening to my words, but actually aligning themselves to my life, it honestly terrified me. It meant that my healing process mattered, that my regulating myself mattered, my integrity mattered. Because if I carried chaos, that chaos would ripple outward. If I carry clarity and safety, that ripples outward too. So as leaders, we don't get to separate our personal life from our public mission. We become the movement that we carry, and that weight is sobering. So here's some insight into guarding the movement that you carry. How do you carry this responsibility? The first, just stay grounded in healing. Don't let your unresolved trauma run your movement. What you don't heal, you will project. 2, protect your moral clarity. Compromise erodes trust. People follow leaders whose compass doesn't wobble. 3rd, multiply the responsibility. Movements collapse when they rest on a single body. Share the weight, build teams, and use co-leaders. And then stay humble. Remember that your movement is bigger than you. Your role is to embody, not to own. So let's really make the neuroscience insight work for us. Resilience is scalable. The beauty of trauma-informed leadership is this: resilience is scalable. When a leader shows regulation under stress, followers can mirror it. That regulation spreads through the collective nervous system. Communities stabilize. Movements grow strong, not brittle. When a leader embodies reactivity, fear, or control, that dysregulation also scales. Movements become chaotic, fragile, and unstable. So the question is never just, am I leading? The question is, what am I multiplying? Here's a few reflection questions to take that deeper dive into your self-awareness. What movement is my leadership creating, even unintentionally? What example in my life is being mirrored by those I lead? The movement I'm becoming aligns with healing, justice, and hope. You are the movement. Here's the truth that I invite you to carry. Movements don't begin with crowds. They begin with one leader, one life lived with clarity, conviction, and example. You don't need a title to start a movement. You don't even need a platform. You are the movement when your mission and your life align. And when you lead that way with trauma-informed awareness, you don't just inspire, you regulate. You don't just direct, you embody. And in doing so, you ignite hope that multiplies far beyond your reach. So thank you for joining me on Rise Up Voices from the Front Lines, especially for these trauma-informed leadership series episodes. If this episode resonates with you, share it, because movements don't start out there. They start in you, and they spread through every life that you touch. Rise up out of the ashes of your experiences and lead your life on fire.
Become a Rise Up Hero sponsor to provide mental wellness and crisis response resources for those who serve country and community. Join us in the Rise Up movement today.